The air in Laub, the city's most exclusive rooftop café, didn't just smell like expensive roasted beans and vanilla. It smelled like status. It was the kind of place where silence was bought and the clink of a silver spoon against porcelain felt like a declaration of war. Ellen Ripley, a name far too heavy for a 7-year-old with bruised knees and mismatched socks, stood frozen as the steam rose from her thin sweater. The liquid wasn't just hot. It was a searing, biting betrayal that clung to her skin. Across from her, Miranda Priestley didn't look like a monster. She looked like a goddess in silk, her face contorted into a mask of exquisite sharp-edged fury. "You clumsy little brat," Miranda hissed, her voice a low whip crack that silenced the entire terrace. She didn't look at the child's reddening arm, she looked at the brown splash on her ivory heels. "Do you have any idea what these cost? More than your life is worth." The surrounding patrons, men in $5,000 suits and women draped in diamonds, suddenly found their avocado toast deeply fascinating. No one moved. No one breathed. The injustice hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Ellen's lower lip trembled, not from the pain, but from the terrifying realization that in a room full of adults, she was completely alone. The tears didn't fall yet. Instead, a primal instinct took over. Ellen didn't look for the exit, she looked for a shield. Her eyes locked onto a figure sitting in the corner shadow, a man who hadn't looked up once, whose very shadow seemed to push the sunlight away. Before Miranda could reach out to grab her shoulder, Ellen bolted. She ran with a desperate, staggering speed, her small shoes slapping against the marble. She didn't stop until she collided with the legs of the man in the corner, her small, scorched hands gripping the fabric of his charcoal trousers, burying her face into his knee. The silence in the room shifted from awkward to lethal. The man, Dominic Toretto, finally moved. He didn't flinch. He didn't push her away. He slowly set down his espresso cup, the porcelain meeting the saucer with a sound like a gavel. His hand, scarred and massive, hovered over the little girl's head for a heartbeat before coming to rest gently on her trembling shoulder. When he looked up, his eyes weren't on the child. They were fixed on Miranda, who had frozen mid-stride, the color draining from her face until she matched her silk dress. "Dominic," Miranda whispered, her voice trembling. "She was careless. She ruined the shoes you bought me." Dominic didn't speak for a long time. The tension was a living thing, a wire tightening around the throats of everyone watching. He looked down at Ellen, seeing the red welt forming on her small arm, and then back at the woman he had called his partner. In that look, a decade of history withered. "You're worried about the shoes, Miranda?" Dominic's voice was a low, guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate the very floorboards. "I'm worried about why a child thinks I'm the only safe place left in this room." He stood up, lifting Ellen into his arms as if she weighed nothing, his gaze sweeping the café like a predator surveying a wasteland. "And I'm wondering," he added, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that carried to every ear, "exactly how much it's going to cost you to make this right." Hello to all of you incredible souls tuning in today. Whether you are watching from the bustling streets of New York, the quiet corners of London, or anywhere in between, I am so grateful to have you here in our storytelling circle. How are you all doing today? I truly hope your heart is light. The penthouse suite of the Grand Continental was a fortress of glass and steel, overlooking a city that Dominic Toretto essentially owned, yet it felt like a cage. As the private elevator chimed, Dominic stepped out, still carrying the small, trembling weight of Ellen Ripley. He didn't head for his office or the bar. He walked straight to the oversized velvet sofa and sat her down, his movements possessing a clinical, focused gentleness that would have shocked his associates. "Clancy," he barked, not loud but with an authority that echoed. From the shadows of the kitchen emerged Clancy Wiggins, a man whose face was a map of old scars but whose hands were steady. He was Dominic's most trusted confidant, a former battlefield medic who had traded the front lines for the payroll of the city's most feared man. He took one look at the child and the angry red burn on her arm and moved before Dominic could even give the order. "I need the kit," Dominic said, his voice tight. "And something for the shock. Sweetie. Lots of sugar." As Clancy disappeared to fetch the supplies, Dominic knelt on the floor. At 6'4" and built like a mountain, he looked absurdly out of place on the rug, but he didn't care. He watched Ellen. She wasn't crying anymore. Her eyes, wide, intelligent and hauntingly old, were fixed on his face. She was memorizing him, searching for the crack in the armor that everyone else feared. "Why me, kid?" Dominic asked softly. "There were 50 people in that room. Most of them think I'm the devil." Ellen swallowed hard, her voice coming out as a tiny, fractured rasp. "The devil doesn't look sad when he thinks no one is watching." The words hit Dominic like a physical blow. He turned away, the memory of his own daughter, a daughter he had lost to a fever 10 years ago, flashing behind his eyes like a strobe light. That loss was the secret engine of his cruelty, the reason he had built an empire out of fear. If he couldn't protect his own blood, he would make sure the world was too afraid to touch anything else he claimed. Clancy returned, kneeling beside them. "Hold her hand, Dom. This is going to sting." As Clancy cleaned the coffee-scented burn, Ellen didn't scream. She squeezed Dominic's hand, her tiny fingers disappearing inside his massive palm. Dominic felt a strange, terrifying sensation in his chest. A thaw. He had spent years ensuring no one could get close enough to hurt him, yet here was a 4-foot-tall girl with a spilled drink and a broken heart, dismantling his defenses without saying a word. "Where are your parents, Ellen?" Clancy asked, his tone fatherly. The girl's gaze dropped to her mismatched socks. "My mom, she's at the laundry. She works 3 jobs. I was supposed to wait on the bench outside the café because the air conditioning is free, but it was so hot. I just wanted a cup of water." "And your father?" Dominic pressed. "He went away a long time ago. Mom says he's a star now. But stars don't help you when you're hungry." Dominic's jaw tightened until the muscles bunched. He recognized that hunger. He recognized that abandonment. It was the same fire that had forged him in the gutters of the South Side before he took the city by force. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany doors of the suite swung open. Miranda Priestley swept in, her fury now replaced by a calculated, chilly poise. She had changed her shoes. She looked perfect, a polished diamond of a woman who felt no remorse for the child she had scorched. "Dominic, enough of this theatrics," Miranda said, tossing her clutch onto the marble table. "The car is waiting for the gala. Give the brat some money for a doctor and let Clancy drop her at a precinct. We're already late." Dominic didn't look up from Ellen's hand. "She has a name, Miranda. It's Ellen." "I don't care if her name is the Queen of Sheba," Miranda snapped, stepping closer, the scent of her expensive perfume clashing with the medicinal smell of the burn cream. "She's a distraction. A nuisance. And frankly, your obsession with this charity case is becoming embarrassing." Dominic stood up slowly. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He walked over to Miranda, stopping so close she had to crane her neck back. He saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, the first honest emotion she'd shown all day. "You poured boiling liquid on a child," Dominic said, his voice a low, terrifying vibration. "And you didn't even look back to see if she was breathing. She tripped me. She's 7. Dominic roared, the sound making the glass windows rattle. "You didn't see a child. You saw a stain on your lifestyle. That's the difference between us, Miranda. I may be a criminal, but I know what a life is worth. You're just a ghost in a nice dress." He leaned in, his shadow swallowing her. "The gala is cancelled. For you, the association with me is cancelled. Get your things. If I see you in this city by sunrise, I'll treat you with the same mercy you showed her." Miranda gasped, her face twisting. "You're dumping me? For this? You'll be a laughingstock, Dominic. The great boss, brought down by a cup of coffee and a gutter rat." "Get out," Dominic whispered. It wasn't a request. As Miranda fled, the heels of her ivory shoes clicking frantically against the floor, Dominic felt a small hand tug on his sleeve. He looked down. Ellen was standing there, her arm bandaged, her expression one of pure, unadulterated awe. "You sent the mean lady away?" she asked. "She wasn't good for the house," Dominic replied, his voice softening. But as he looked at Ellen, he realized he had just started a war. Miranda wasn't just his girlfriend. She was the daughter of Hollis Doyle, the city's most corrupt senator. By casting her out, he hadn't just ended a relationship. He had invited a storm that would test every ounce of his power. "Clancy," Dominic said, his eyes never leaving Ellen. "Find her mother. Bring her here. And double the guard at the gate. The senator isn't going to like that his princess got her feelings hurt." The storm Dominic anticipated didn't arrive with a thunderclap. It arrived with a phone call that turned the air in the penthouse to ice. While Clancy was out tracing the mother's location, Dominic sat in his study, the heavy oak desk between him and a small sleeping girl curled up in a leather armchair. The orange glow of the city lights bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the room. The burner phone on his desk buzzed. The caller ID was blank. Dominic. The voice on the other end was smooth, practiced, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was Hollis Doyle. My daughter just arrived home in tears. She tells me you chose a piece of street trash over her. She tells me you threatened her. Dominic leaned back, his hand instinctively reaching for the heavy silver lighter he carried, a habit from a life he'd tried to leave behind. Your daughter is a liability, Hollis. She's cruel and she's sloppy. I don't keep either in my house. You're a king because I allow the sun to shine on your kingdom, Toretto, Doyle hissed. You have 1 hour to put that girl in a car and send her to the precinct with a signed confession that she harassed Miranda. If you don't, I will unleash the full weight of the district attorney's office on every warehouse, every dock, and every ledger you own. You'll be a memory by dawn. The girl stays, Dominic said, his voice flat and final. He ended the call and crushed the burner phone in his grip. The stakes had just shifted from a personal spat to a total war. But before Dominic could map out his defense, the elevator doors hissed open. Clancy stepped out, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman who looked like a ghost, pale, exhausted, and wearing a faded blue uniform from a commercial laundry service. Her hair was pulled back in a frantic knot, and her eyes were red-rimmed with terror. Sarah Connor, Clancy introduced her, his voice low. The woman didn't wait for a greeting. She saw Ellen asleep in the chair and let out a choked sob, rushing forward to pull the child into her arms. Ellen stirred, blinking awake, and immediately clung to her mother. Mom. The big man saved me. He sent the mean lady away. Sarah looked up at Dominic, and for the first time in years, the man who feared nothing felt a jolt of genuine electricity. She didn't look at him with the terror the rest of the city did. She looked at him with the fierce, protective rage of a lioness. Who are you? She demanded, her voice trembling but sharp. Why is my daughter in a place like this? Why is her arm bandaged? My name is Dominic Toretto, he said, standing up. And your daughter was attacked by a woman who should have known better. I'm the one who made sure it didn't get worse. Sarah stood her ground, even as she realized the opulence of the room and the sheer presence of the man in front of her. I know who you are. I've seen your face in the papers. You're the man they say runs the docks. You're the man people disappear because of. She stepped back, pulling Ellen with her. We're leaving. Now. You can't, Dominic said, stepping around the desk. Is that a threat? Sarah snapped, her hand reaching for a heavy glass paperweight on the desk. It's a warning, Dominic countered, his eyes softening just a fraction. The woman who hurt Ellen is the senator's daughter. He's already called. He's looking for a scapegoat, and he's going to use your daughter to get to me. If you walk out those doors, his men will pick you up before you hit the sidewalk. They won't be as gentle as I've been. The room went silent. Sarah's grip on Ellen tightened. She looked from Dominic's cold, hard face to her daughter's bandaged arm and then back again. The realization hit her like a physical weight. She was caught in the middle of a war between a titan and a tyrant. Why do you care? Sarah whispered, her defiance giving way to a desperate curiosity. You don't know us. We're nothing to you. Dominic looked at Ellen, who was watching him with those same trusting eyes. Because for 1 minute in that cafe she made me feel like a human being again. And because I don't like people who use their power to break small things. Just then the security monitors on the wall flickered. 3 black SUVs were pulling up to the front gates of the building. Men in tactical gear, not police but Doyle's private security, began to spill out. They're here, Clancy said, checking his sidearm. Dominic didn't panic. He looked at Sarah, offering his hand. I can't promise you'll be safe forever, Sarah. But I promise that if you stay here they have to go through me to get to her. Do you trust me? Sarah looked at his hand, a hand that had done terrible things, but was currently reached out in a gesture of pure protection. She looked at her daughter. Slowly she reached out and took it. The first major twist had arrived. Dominic Toretto wasn't just fighting for his empire anymore. He was fighting for a family he didn't even know he wanted. Things are moving fast now. Dominic has officially declared war on the most powerful politician in the city to protect a woman and a child he just met. The penthouse was no longer a home. It was a command center. While the hum of the city continued below, unaware of the silent siege beginning at the Grand Continental, Dominic moved with a lethal, calculated grace. He didn't just order the gates locked, he initiated a total blackout of the building's digital footprint. Clancy, get them into the panic suite. Not the guest rooms, the vault, Dominic ordered. Sarah pulled Ellen closer, her eyes darting between the flickering security monitors and the man who was calmly checking the clip of a heavy semi-automatic. The vault? You're locking us in a cage. I'm locking you in the only place in this city that a senator's warrant can't open, Dominic replied, his voice a low vibration. Hollis Doyle doesn't play by the rules, Sarah. He uses the law like a blunt instrument. Right now he's not looking for justice, he's looking for leverage. As Clancy led Sarah and a sleepy, confused Ellen toward the reinforced steel doors hidden behind a library bookshelf, Dominic's phone chimed again. It wasn't a call. It was a video file. He opened it to see a grainy feed of his main distribution warehouse on the docks. In the video, men in suits were hauling out crates, smashing inventory and arresting his foreman. Hollis was moving faster than anticipated. He wasn't just coming for the girl. He was dismantling Dominic's life's work piece by piece. Dominic, Sarah's voice broke through his calculation. She had stopped at the entrance to the vault. You're losing everything, aren't you? Because of a spilled cup of coffee. Because of us. Dominic looked at her. In the dim emergency lighting, Sarah Connor looked less like a victim and more like a woman who had spent her life surviving on the margins. There was a strength in her jaw that reminded him of the steel he dealt in. I lost everything a long time ago, Sarah, he said quietly. The rest of this, it's just property. Property can be replaced. A soul can't. The moment was interrupted by the heavy thud of the elevator hitting the penthouse floor. The security bypass had been triggered. Dominic shoved Sarah into the vault and slammed the heavy door just as the elevator doors slid open. But it wasn't a tactical team that stepped out. It was a man in a sharp gray suit with a silver ponytail and eyes like a shark. Vincent Hanna, the city's most relentless special crimes investigator, and the only man Dominic truly respected. Toretto, Hanna said, keeping his hands visible but away from his holster. I'm not here for the senator. And I'm certainly not here for his bratty daughter. Then you're trespassing, Vincent, Dominic said, aiming his weapon with steady hands. And you know how I feel about uninvited guests. Doyle is going rogue, Hanna said, ignoring the gun. He's pulled half my task force to hunt for that kid. He's claiming you kidnapped her. If I don't bring her in within the hour, he's authorized a lethal extraction. That means he doesn't care if she survives the rescue as long as you don't survive the night. Dominic felt a cold rage settle in his marrow. He'd kill the child to frame me? He'd burn the city to keep his daughter's reputation clean, Hanna replied. Give me the girl, Dom. I can put her in protective custody. I can keep her away from Doyle's reach. Dominic stepped closer, his shadow looming over the investigator. Protective custody? You mean a precinct filled with Doyle's donors? No. She stays with me. You can't win this, Dominic. You're a man with a gun against a man with a flag. He'll crush you. Let him try, Dominic hissed. But tell him this. If a single hair on that girl's head is harmed, I won't go to the papers. I won't go to the courts. I'll come for him. And he knows I don't miss. Hanna sighed, a look of grim admiration crossing his face. You've changed, Toretto. You used to be about the business. Now you're acting like a father. That's a dangerous way to stay alive in this town. As Hanna retreated to the elevator, the tension in the room didn't dissipate. It curdled. Dominic returned to the vault, his heart hammering a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. He found Sarah sitting on the floor, Ellen's head in her lap. The small room was filled with gold bars and stacks of currency, but Sarah was looking at a small, framed photograph on the shelf. A photo of Dominic's late daughter. She looks like Ellen, Sarah whispered. Dominic sat down across from her, the weight of the night finally pressing on his shoulders. Her name was Letty. She was 8. I thought I could protect her from the world by being the biggest monster in it. I was wrong. The world found a way in anyway. Sarah reached out, her hand hovering over his before finally resting on his forearm. For a second, the Mafia boss and the laundry worker weren't opposites. They were two people who knew exactly what it felt like to be hunted. You're not a monster, Dominic. A monster would have handed us over to save his dogs. I might still lose them, he admitted. Then we'll find a way to build something else, she said, her voice filled with a sudden fierce hope. But the peace was short-lived. A muffled explosion rocked the building. The lights flickered and died. On the backup monitor, Dominic saw the nightmare. Doyle's men weren't coming through the doors anymore. They were rappelling from helicopters onto the balcony. The red herrings were gone. The talking was over. The hunt had begun. I can't believe how high the stakes just got. Dominic is facing a lethal extraction, and the senator is willing to sacrifice everything to cover his tracks. The explosion didn't just shatter the balcony glass. It shattered the illusion that Dominic's penthouse was an untouchable sanctuary. As smoke curled into the living area, Dominic shoved Sarah and Ellen deeper into the vault's alcove. The red emergency lights pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Clancy, suppressive fire on the north terrace. Dominic shouted over the comms, his voice a gravelly roar. But as the heavy steel door of the vault began to hiss shut, a hand jammed into the mechanism. A gloved, tactical hand. The door groaned, the safety sensors forcing it back open. Standing there wasn't a mercenary. It was Miranda Priestley, her silk dress replaced by a sharp tactical trench coat, her eyes burning with a cold, manic clarity. Behind her stood two men with silenced submachine guns. "You really thought it was just about the shoes, Dominic?" Miranda asked, her voice dripping with a poisonous satisfaction. "You always were a bit too sentimental for your own good." Dominic stepped in front of Sarah and Ellen, his body a wall of solid muscle. "Get out of my house, Miranda. Before I forget you were ever in my bed. This isn't your house anymore." "It's a crime scene," she countered. She held up a digital tablet, flicking a file toward the large wall monitor that flickered back to life. "You wondered why I was so cruel to that little girl in the cafe? It wasn't an accident, Dominic. I needed her to run. I needed her to run to you." Dominic's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Look at the screen, Dom," Miranda hissed. A series of DNA profiles appeared. On one side, Ellen's name. On the other, a redacted file that slowly decrypted. As the name appeared, the air left the room. The biological father listed wasn't a star in the sky. It was Hollis Doyle. Sarah let out a sharp, strangled gasp. "No, that's impossible." "Is it, Sarah?" Miranda stepped into the vault, her guards leveling their weapons. "My father had a lapse in judgment 8 years ago with a temp in his office. He thought he'd paid you enough to disappear forever. But then he found out you kept the child. He found out there was a living, breathing piece of evidence that could tank his presidential run." The revelation hit Dominic like a freight train. The senator didn't want the girl silenced because she was a nuisance. He wanted her dead because she was his daughter, an illegitimate stain on a perfect family legacy. The cafe wasn't an accident, Dominic realized, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You baited her. You poured that coffee to see if she'd scream, to see if I'd take the bait and hide her. You wanted her under my roof so you could frame a mafia boss for the kidnapping and eventual death of a senator's secret child. 2 birds, 1 stone. Give the man a prize," Miranda mocked. "My father gets his clean record back and I get to watch the man who dumped me burn at the stake. It's poetic, really." Sarah collapsed to her knees, clutching Ellen. "I didn't know. I thought he was just a powerful man who wanted me gone. I never told her. I never wanted her to know she came from such a monster." Dominic looked at Miranda, and for the first time he didn't see a woman he had once cared for. He saw a mirror of the very evil he had fought his whole life. "You're going to kill your own sister for a campaign seat?" "I don't have a sister," Miranda snapped. "I have a bloodline to protect. Now step aside, Dominic. If you die resisting a rescue, the story just gets better for the morning news." In that moment of shared vulnerability, Dominic looked back at Sarah. The connection they had built over the last few hours wasn't just trauma. It was a recognition of truth. He saw the terror in her eyes, but he also saw the fierce love for the girl she had raised alone. Dominic didn't step aside. He smiled, a cold, jagged expression that promised nothing but ruins. "You made one mistake, Miranda," Dominic said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small black detonator. "What are you doing?" "You assumed I play by the rules when my family is threatened," Dominic said. "This vault isn't just a cage. It's a tomb. And I'm the only one who knows the way out through the subfloors." With a sudden violent movement, Dominic tackled the lead guard, his massive fist connecting with the man's jaw with the sound of breaking stone. Clancy. Blow the floor. The world turned into fire and falling concrete. I am absolutely reeling. The little damsel is actually the senator's daughter, and Miranda is her half-sister trying to eliminate her? This just went from a mafia standoff to a high-level political conspiracy. How do you feel about this twist? Did you suspect Ellen was more than just a random child? Sound off in the comments with secret if you saw it coming, or shock if you're as surprised as I am. And please, if you want to see if Dominic can survive the fall, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support is the only thing keeping this story going. Falling through the darkness of his own building, Dominic must protect Sarah and Ellen from the debris and the assassins above. But with the floor gone and the senator's hitmen closing in, they are heading straight into their darkest hour. The world didn't end with a bang. It ended with the sickening sensation of weightlessness. The floor of the vault, rigged with emergency demolition charges Dominic had installed years ago for a scorched earth scenario, fell away into the maintenance abyss. Dominic's massive arms acted like a cage, shielding Sarah and Ellen as they tumbled through the darkness, landing on a pile of industrial insulation and shredded blueprints 3 levels below. The air was thick with pulverized concrete and the smell of ozone. Sarah. Ellen. Dominic's voice was a jagged rasp. He coughed, dragging himself upright, his ribs screaming in protest. In the dim, flickering amber of the emergency lights he saw them. Sarah was huddled over Ellen, her body a shield, but her face was smeared with blood from a gash on her forehead. Ellen was silent, too silent. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the jagged hole above them where the silhouette of the penthouse glowed against the night sky. "We have to move," Dominic wheezed, reaching for them. "I can't, my leg." Sarah gasped, clutching her thigh where a piece of rebar had grazed the muscle. The fierce lioness was finally breaking. The weight of being hunted by the most powerful man in the state was crushing her spirit. "Dominic, take her. Just take Ellen and go. I'm slowing you down." "No." Ellen suddenly screamed, the sound echoing off the cold steel walls of the maintenance level. "Mom, don't leave. Please." "Nobody is leaving anyone," Dominic growled, hauling Sarah up with a strength fueled by pure adrenaline. He threw her arm over his shoulder, but even as he did, the sound of rhythmic thudding began above. Hollis Doyle's men weren't waiting for the smoke to clear. They were fast roping down the breach. "They're coming," Clancy's voice crackled over a broken comlink, sounding distant and distorted. "Dom. I'm pinned. The lobby is a war zone." Doyle called in a terrorist threat. "The National Guard is 3 blocks away. They aren't coming to save you, Dom. They're coming to finish the job." Dominic looked at the 2 terrified souls leaning on him. For the first time in his life, the king of the docks felt the cold breath of total defeat. He had no more tricks. His building was a tomb, his allies were scattered, and the law was being rewritten in real time to execute him. He led them into a narrow utility tunnel, the walls sweating with condensation. They reached a dead end, a heavy pressure door that required a biometric scan. Dominic pressed his thumb to the pad. Access denied. The power surge from the explosion had fried the sensors. They were trapped. Behind them, the first of the tactical lights began to dance against the tunnel walls. The shadows of the mercenaries grew long and predatory. "Dominic," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she looked at her daughter. If they take her to him, she'll never come back, will she?" Dominic looked at the red welt on Ellen's arm, the mark of the coffee burn that had started this entire nightmare. He looked at the child who had looked at a monster and seen a savior. He felt a hollow, aching despair. He had promised her protection, and all he had given her was a more violent way to die. "I'm sorry," Dominic whispered, his head bowing. It was the first time those words had crossed his lips in a decade. "I thought I was strong enough." "Look at me," Ellen said, reaching up to touch his stubbled cheek. Her small hand was cold. "You sent the mean lady away. You're the good man." The irony was a knife in his gut. A good man wouldn't have brought them here. A good man wouldn't have a vault full of blood money. He slumped against the cold steel door, hearing the heavy boots of the killers rounding the final corner. He drew his last magazine, his fingers fumbling with the metal. This was it. The end of the Toretto Empire, dying in a sewer while the world cheered for the heroic senator who saved his daughter from a mobster. Despair wasn't just a feeling. It was the darkness closing in, smelling of gunpowder and lost chances. I can barely type this. Everything is falling apart. Dominic is trapped, Sarah is injured, and the heroic rescue is actually a hit squad. Feels like there's no way out. Have you ever felt like the world was completely against you, even when you were doing the right thing? Please, leave a comment with hope if you think they can make it out, or heartbroken if you're as devastated as I am. And if you've followed the story this far, hit subscribe. We need to stay together for the end of this. With the door locked and the killers seconds away, Dominic is forced to face his darkest fear. But in the silence of the tunnel, a hidden truth about Sarah's past, and a secret she's kept from even herself, might be the only key to their survival. The shadows of the hitmen stretched toward them, the beams of their weapon-mounted lights cutting through the dust like searchlights in a prison yard. Dominic gripped his firearm, his knuckles white, preparing for a final stand that he knew he wouldn't survive. But as the first mercenary rounded the corner, Sarah Connor didn't shrink back. She didn't cower. She stood up, ignoring the agony in her leg, and pressed her hand against the biometric scanner. Not her thumb, her palm. The vault didn't deny me because it was broken, Sarah whispered, her voice suddenly steady, layered with a hidden strength. It denied you because you aren't the primary owner of the Continental's substructure. The scanner didn't flash red. It turned a soft, pulsing emerald. The massive pressure door hissed, the vacuum seal breaking with a roar of escaping air. Dominic stared at her, stunned. Sarah? How? Before I worked at the laundry, Dominic. I was a lead architect for the Doyle Group, she said, ushering Ellen inside. I designed the safety protocols for this entire district. Hollis didn't just want me gone because of Ellen. He wanted me gone because I know exactly where he hid the back doors to his private servers. I know where the bodies are buried, Dominic. Literally. The realization sparked like a live wire in Dominic's mind. They didn't just have a child. They had the blueprint to the senator's destruction. They scrambled inside the secondary chamber, the door slamming shut and locking just as a hail of bullets sparked against the reinforced titanium exterior. Inside, the room was filled with ancient servers and humming cooling fans, the black box of the city's infrastructure. Dominic looked at Sarah, really looking at her for the first time. She wasn't just a victim he was protecting. She was the missing piece of the puzzle. You have the evidence. To take him down. I have the digital keys to every offshore account he's used to fund his campaign and pay off his fixers, Sarah said, her eyes flashing with a cold, righteous fire. I was too afraid to use them. I thought he'd kill Ellen if I spoke. But he's trying to kill her anyway. Dominic felt a surge of hope so powerful it felt like fire in his veins. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the console. He thinks I'm just a thug with a gun. He thinks you're just a girl he can silence. He's forgotten that when you back a lioness into a corner, you don't get the girl, you get the teeth. Dominic, she said, her voice softening for a brief second as she looked into his eyes. If we do this, there's no going back for you. The police, the feds, they'll see everything. Let them see, Dominic said, a smirk returning to his face. I'd rather be a man in a cell who did the right thing than a king on a throne of lies. Plenty. Are you still with me? A static-filled voice erupted from a terminal. I'm in the security booth on the 5th floor, boss. I've got a clear line to the city's main broadcast tower. If you can upload that data, the whole world gets a front-row seat to the Doyle family reunion. Dominic turned to Ellen, who was watching them with wide, hopeful eyes. Kid, you remember what you said? That I was the good man. Ellen nodded. Well, it's time for the good man to finish the job. The turning point had arrived. They weren't running anymore. They were the ones going on the hunt. I can't believe it. Sarah was the architect. This changes the entire dynamic. They have the power to take down the senator and his daughter in one move. Do you think they can upload the data before the mercenaries break through that titanium door? I want to see the chat blowing up. Type, exposed, if you're ready to see the senator fall. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you are going to miss the most epic climax we've ever produced on this channel. Hit that button and join the fight. The final confrontation is here. Dominic must hold the line against a small army while Sarah initiates the upload. But the senator has one last card to play. A secret that could force Dominic to choose between the girl's life and the truth. The titanium door groaned under the impact of a thermal breach charge. The mercenaries weren't just shooting anymore. They were melting their way in. Inside the server room, the air grew hot and thick with the smell of scorched metal. "Data's at 40%, Sarah shouted over the roar of the machinery, her fingers flying across the keys. Her face was illuminated by the scrolling lines of code, the digital evidence of a decade of corruption, murder, and the betrayal of a daughter. "Dominic, they're almost through." Dominic didn't look back. He moved to the center of the room, overturning a heavy server rack to create a makeshift barricade. He checked his sidearm, 3 rounds left. Behind him he felt a small hand tug at his tactical vest. "I'm scared," Ellen whispered. "I know, kid," Dominic said, his voice a low, steady anchor in the chaos. "But look at your mom. She's the strongest person in this room. You stay behind her and you don't stop until the screen turns green. You hear me?" Suddenly the door didn't just open, it shattered. A concussive blast sent a wave of dust into the room. Through the haze, a figure stepped in, flanked by 2 men in black armor. It wasn't a soldier. It was Hollis Doyle himself. He wore a tuxedo, looking as if he had just stepped off a stage, but his eyes were the eyes of a man who had long ago traded his soul for a seat of power. "Stop the upload, Sarah," Doyle said, his voice echoing with a chilling, fatherly authority. "Do it now or I'll have them level this entire sublevel. I'll tell the world the Mafia boss blew the building to hide his crimes. No one will ever know you were here." "They'll know, Hollis," Sarah spat, her hand hovering over the enter key. "The truth is already halfway to the satellite." Doyle smiled, a slow, ugly thing. He pulled a small remote from his pocket. "You designed the security, Sarah. But you didn't design the fail-safes I added later. This room is rigged with a gas suppression system. Hey on. If I press this, the oxygen in this room vanishes in 10 seconds. You and the girl will go to sleep, and you'll never wake up." Dominic stepped out from behind his barricade, his gun leveled at the senator's heart. "You'd kill your own blood to save a career? You're even more of a coward than I thought." "It's not a career, Toretto. It's a legacy," Doyle hissed. "Give me the drive and I let you walk out the back. You get to be the hero who saved them. I get to keep my life. It's the only deal you're going to get." Dominic looked at Sarah. He saw the hesitation in her eyes, the mother's instinct to save her child even at the cost of justice. Then he looked at Ellen. The little girl wasn't looking at the senator. She was looking at the coffee burn on her arm, then back at Dominic. "Don't do it," Ellen whispered. "Don't let the mean man win." Dominic's heart hammered against his ribs. In that split second he saw the ultimate twist. He didn't fire at the senator. He fired at the overhead halon tank's release valve, but not to break it, to jam it. The bullet lodged perfectly in the emergency override lever. "Sarah, now!" Dominic roared. Sarah slammed her palm onto the keyboard. The screen flashed. "Upload complete. Broadcasting." Doyle's face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He pressed the button on his remote, but nothing happened. The jammed valve hissed but held. "No. No, you've ruined everything." Outside in the city, on every jumbotron in Times Square, on every news feed and on every smartphone, the truth began to play. The offshore accounts, the recordings of Doyle ordering the disposal of his mistress, and the footage of Miranda pouring hot coffee on an innocent child. It was all there. The lethal extraction was being watched by millions in real time. The mercenaries lowered their weapons, looking at their phones, then at the man who had hired them. The authority had evaporated. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were witnesses. Dominic walked toward Doyle. The senator tried to draw a hidden pistol, but Dominic was faster. He didn't shoot. He grabbed Doyle by the collar, lifting the powerful man off his feet, his shadow dwarfing the politician. "You wanted to be a star, Hollis?" Dominic whispered, quoting Ellen's mother. "Stars only shine in the dark. And your darkness just ran out of time." He dropped the senator like a piece of trash just as Vincent Hanna and a swarm of real, uncorrupted police officers burst through the back service entrance. "Drop it, Toretto," Hanna shouted, though his gun was aimed firmly at Doyle and his men. Dominic slowly raised his hands, a faint, weary smile on his face. He looked back at Sarah and Ellen. They were safe. The war was over. The little damsel hadn't just run to a mafia boss. She had run to the one man in the world who was willing to lose his kingdom to save her soul. "I'm literally shaking." The senator is done. The truth is out. Dominic chose the ultimate sacrifice, his own freedom, to ensure that Sarah and Ellen could have a future. Is there anything more heroic than a man who knows his own sins and chooses to pay for them to save someone else? The dust is settling and the handcuffs are clicking. But in the aftermath of the city's biggest scandal, what becomes of the bond between the Mafia boss and the girl who changed him? The final closure is coming up next. The rising sun began to bleed over the city skyline, turning the smoke from the Grand Continental into a soft, golden haze. The sirens that had screamed through the night were now a distant rhythmic hum, replaced by the quiet murmurs of a city in shock. In the back of an ambulance parked a safe distance from the police perimeter, Ellen sat wrapped in a thick wool blanket, a cup of cocoa held tightly in her small hands. Beside her, Sarah Connor looked at her daughter with eyes that finally held no fear. The bandage on Sarah's head was a small price to pay for the weight that had been lifted from her heart. Hollis Doyle and Miranda Priestley were being transported in separate armored units, their political legacies turning to ash in the court of public opinion. Dominic Toretto stood near the edge of the rooftop, his wrists bound by heavy zip ties. He wasn't looking at the cameras or the sea of officers. He was looking at the horizon. Vincent Hanna approached him, leaning against the railing. He didn't look like a victor. He looked like a man who had seen too much. The DA is already talking about a plea, Dom. Your testimony against Doyle is worth more than every warehouse on those docks. You'll serve time, but it won't be a life sentence. Not after what you did tonight. Dominic turned, his expression unreadable. I didn't do it for the plea, Vincent. I know, Hanna said, pulling a pair of cutters from his belt. He snipped the zip ties, letting Dominic's hands fall free. Go say goodbye. You've got 5 minutes before the transport arrives. Dominic walked toward the ambulance. The officers stepped aside, not out of fear this time but out of a strange, newfound respect. Sarah stood up as he approached, her eyes shimmering with tears. She didn't say a word. She simply stepped into his space and pulled him into a fierce, grounding embrace. You saved us, she whispered into his chest. You gave her a father's protection when her own father tried to steal her life. Dominic pulled back slightly, his hand coming up to gently brush a stray hair from her face. You gave me something too, Sarah. You reminded me that I'm not just the shadow I built around myself. Ellen hopped down from the ambulance, her blanket trailing behind her like a cape. She ran to Dominic, throwing her arms around his legs. Are you going away? Dominic knelt, coming eye to eye with the girl who had changed the course of his life with a single spilled cup of coffee. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver cross he had carried for years, the only thing he had left from his own family. He placed it in her palm. I have to go take care of some things, kid, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But this is a promise. It means that no matter where I am, you're part of the family now. And family always finds their way back home. Ellen gripped the cross, her eyes bright. I'll keep it safe. Until you come back. As the police transport pulled up, Dominic stood and walked toward it with his head held high. He wasn't a criminal being hauled away. He was a man who had redeemed his past by securing someone else's future. 6 months later, the laundry where Sarah worked had been replaced by a small, thriving architectural firm. She sat at her desk, looking at the plans for a new community center, one built on the site of an old, abandoned warehouse on the docks. The door opened and Ellen ran in, her school bag bouncing. She was wearing a new sweater, and the burn on her arm had faded into a faint, barely visible silver line, a badge of courage rather than a mark of shame. She went straight to the window, looking down at the street. A black sedan was idling at the curb. The window rolled down just an inch and a man's hand, massive, scarred and familiar, rested on the frame. He didn't get out and he didn't call out. He didn't have to. Ellen reached into her collar and pulled out the silver cross, holding it up so it caught the afternoon sun. The car honked twice, a low rhythmic greeting before pulling away into the flow of the city. Sarah walked over and put her arm around her daughter's shoulder. They weren't running anymore. They weren't hiding. They were loved, they were seen, and they were finally truly free. The story that began with a spilled drink ended with a reinforced bond that no empire could break. In the heart of a cold city, a mafia boss had found his humanity, a mother had found her voice, and a little damsel had found a home in the most unlikely of arms. What an incredible journey we have been on together. From that tense moment in the cafe to the final emotional reunion, we've seen that true strength isn't about power. It's about protection. I am so moved by the way Dominic chose to redefine his legacy for the sake of an innocent child. I want to thank every single one of you for staying until the very end. Your comments, your theories, and your support are what make this channel possible. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment saying family. It's the word that defined this entire adventure. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next 40-minute emotional epic. We have so many more stories to tell and I can't wait to share them with you. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and remember, even the darkest shadows can be broken by a little bit of light. See you in the next one.